Alright guys, welcome back. GM Light here, and today we're going to be talking about the 9th and the last Saw movie before the new one comes out, Saw X, Spiral from the book of Saw. It's crazy that we finally made it, but I'm really excited to talk about this movie. This is one of the ones that I was the most excited to rewatch and see how it holds up. So if you don't know what Spiral from the book of Saw is about, it's about working in the shadow of his father. Detective Zeke Banks and his rookie partner take charge of an investigation into grisly murders that are eerily reminiscent of the city's gruesome past. Unwittingly entrapped in a deepening mystery, Zeke finds himself at the center of the killer's morbid game. So when Spiral first came out, I was very high on the movie, and I was kind of surprised to see that a lot of other people were not feeling the same way as me. I actually had it very high up in my ranking, something that I've gotten an endless amount of shit about at work. But after rewatching it, I can say that I really do stand by what I said then, and I feel the same way now. Because from the get-go, I'm a huge fan of this premise. I love the idea of somebody completely independent of Jigsaw taking from the book of Saw and that ideology of Jigsaw and applying it to a broken system. Something like with how in the city there's very clearly a corruption in their police force, that this version of Jigsaw applies to that. And it also just makes for a great setup to a spin-off. Naturally, this lends itself to spin-offs because all you have to do is take that ideology, take that natural premise of it, have some kind of follower or apprentice that has some sort of grievance, and then just use them to kind of tell this interesting story. That's actually what I like about it, is that the series really does lend itself very naturally to having spin-offs and things like that, even though they don't really tend to capitalize on it throughout the movies. So it's cool and kind of refreshing for them to go in a completely different direction, kind of independent of the previous Saw movies, the previous continuity, just do its own thing and kind of be focused on that. It's also the most different feeling Saw movie, I gotta say. Just everything about it. It has a similar aesthetic, but it still just goes its total own way. No John Kramer, nothing like that, no connections to the past. It's completely its own thing and does something very different. And it benefits from all the greatness of the Saw movies, but it also just goes its own way. And that's something I really admire about it. And really getting into further just of the goods, there's a grittiness to the traps in this movie whenever the people are stuck in a trap. There's a simple feeling to it. They are simple traps, but they're also very dirty, gritty, and you feel that kind of grime to it. There's no overt complications to the trap, which I think sometimes can be better, because then you're not focused on all the complications of the trap. You're just focused on some simple sacrifice that they do to escape. And that's where some of the best traps kind of come in. As well as that too, I really love Chris Rock in this main character role. He's very funny at the right moments, but he also pulls it back when it's necessary and when the scene's more serious. I like the idea of having a main character of this movie, and you know what they probably were intending to do is have him move forward as the protagonist, and I think that he just does such a great job and you really root for him. I like having a main protagonist to root for and really care about and get into in a story like this. They also utilize him with this version's Jigsaw very well, and kind of their dynamic in the way that the Jigsaw of this movie sort of reflects him and his mentality. Since Chris Rock's character was done very dirty by this police department, he'd have every motivation to kind of be like this Jigsaw or even maybe root for him, but at the center of it, he's a good cop. He wants to do right by the city, and even though this police force has a lot of issues, he doesn't want them to have what happens to them. The soundtrack's also pretty great. I feel like this is the first Saw movie that doesn't just utilize a score-based theme. They actually have music in this movie, and that adds to the differentiation between this movie and the rest of the line of movies. It just adds a different flavor and kind of acts as a spice to what's going on in the background. Also to make some scenes a little bit more vibrant. And then on top of that, you also have that absolute banger with the 21 Savage Spiral song. I eat that shit up. I love that song. Getting into more of the story-based things, I like how there's a very dog-eat-dog kind of vibe to the precinct in this movie. It just sets up the tone, the lesson, the message very well in this movie. It allows you to get more invested and even kind of feel more conflicted about what's going on with this version of Jigsaw. And although the movie starts a bit slower, I'd say that the fact that they take time to develop Zeke, his partner, the precinct, set up this world and the dynamics in this precinct, it just adds more to the story and makes it a bit more satisfying when the Saw traps go down, when things are happening. You get the background and the sense of lore to this precinct that just invests you more in the story, and it makes you more interested in what makes this version of Jigsaw target these cops. And it's not just that, there's more to it because you have this background of this public legislation, the political side of it, like with what they said with Article 8, the way that they ran things previous to what was happening in this movie, and that's just more interesting background and stuff that gets you more interested in the story. It all feeds into just what feels like a Saw movie that not only has the tension with all the Jigsaw stuff and the traps, because for the first time you're kind of invested about what's going on with the investigation, with the cops and stuff. Not only do you have that tension of Jigsaw, you also have the tension inside the precinct, because like the enabling, the corrupt culture that's going on in that precinct, it just adds for that another sense that you don't know who Jigsaw is, you don't know why he's doing what he's doing, and then it's also puts Chris Rock in this situation where he doesn't feel like the police are on his side. Jigsaw's obviously doing things that he's trying to stop, so he's just between a rock and a hard place in the story, and it makes for more compelling drama. They also do a bit of the things that I think they lost since the first movie, which is the first movie gives you all the pieces to this puzzle. They have it sort of laid out in front of you in a way that you can't really decipher them. You don't know how they get all put together, but then on rewatch or when you watch the end of the movie, you put it all together in your head and it makes for a satisfying little puzzle. Like they do that with stuff like the foreshadowing with the pig puppet on the strings, how that applies to later in the end of the movie. There's just stuff like that that I think adds more to the movie and makes it a bit more intelligent than I think some people give it credit for. I also love too how each trap is a reflection of what these police are getting put on trial for. Yeah, they kind of sort of did that in some of the other movies, but some of them didn't really make any sense in relation to the trap. Some of them just felt a bit random and like it was just do something fucked up so that you can live. This one feels like it's directly aligned with what Jigsaw is accusing them of and what they're forced to do. And it makes for a cleverness to it that can be missing in some of the other Saw movies, like the liar having to rip out his tongue, having to rip the fingers off of the cop with the itchy trigger finger, and the severing spine for the spineless captain. It's stuff like that. It's just, it feels a bit more intelligently written, and it's stuff that I appreciate. Also too, with the new Jigsaw himself, despite the reveal being pretty obvious, the motivation's very interesting, and like I mentioned earlier, I think it really reflects Zeke's internal struggle, what he's feeling, what he's going through. It makes for an interesting dichotomy between the hero and the villain, which again, to emphasize, and I've said this many times before, but what I love in a horror movie is having a hero and a villain, a protagonist and an antagonist. Like with The Collector, how you have Arkin and The Collector. With the Child's Play movies, you have Chucky and Andy, and Terrifier 2, you have Sienna and Art the Clown. It's stuff like that that I really like, and the dynamic is so interesting between these two characters. I really think it's a damn shame that we're probably not going to see any kind of follow-up to this movie. The factors and the way that backstory of this Jigsaw fits into the pieces of the story makes for very compelling drama, and it all is very strong. And spoilers, if you haven't seen this movie, I'm going to go into a bit more direct spoilers, but there's a very understanding motivation for why this Jigsaw is the way he is. He has huge grievances with the police. You understand why, because he was directly impacted by the Article 8 politics, by this precinct, by these cops, by the corruption. And when Zeke did the right thing, Zeke's life suffered, and in that same moment, both Zeke and Jigsaw's lives were changed. So they reflect each other's character arcs, and they both make for interesting complements to each other in the movie. The ending is also brutal, and I think that thematically what it does is what Candyman 2021 tried to do, but it works a lot better than Candyman 2021. Where in Candyman 2021, they kind of had this cartoonish illustration of corrupt cops. This guy's on the ground, literally not potentially posing a threat, and the cops just come in and shoot him in cold blood when he's on the ground dying. Yeah, because that's believable. They actually set up this scenario in Spiral at the end where they black out the lights, Samuel L. Jackson's character is pulled on the strings, and the SWAT team's put in a situation where it's believable that they would do what they did and execute him. And then you just have Zeke left to kind of reap the consequences of that. Very, very brutal. And also the implications of why this version of Jigsaw made him make the choice that he made are very interesting. Like that test of loyalty, I find very interesting, and I think that the ending of this movie just sets up a very interesting potential sequel that, again, we're just probably not going to get. I kind of like how just absolutely heartless this ending is. It's really, really harsh, and it really left me wanting more. All the pieces came together in a very compelling way, and I really would love to see them follow up on this. Into some of my negatives, I think that there's a few odd choices in this movie. I think it was a big mistake to timeline-wise kind of spoil some of the kills in this movie, like especially with Fitch. They make it very obvious that he's not making it out of the trap because they show his body before they even show him do the trap. And unfortunately, I don't like that because it takes the tension out of whether he will survive it or not. I think that when they do some of these saw traps, what makes them engaging sometimes is, are they gonna make it in time? Are they gonna do what they have to do in time? Are they gonna survive? When you take out the results of what's gonna happen, that just takes out a little bit of the tension. And I just think that was a bit of a mistake. I also think that once they killed the partner off and did it off screen, it was pretty obvious from there that he was gonna be the twist villain. It's just a lot of different factors. The fact that he wasn't corrupt, the fact that they didn't show the trap, so much about it made it very obvious that he was going to turn out to be Jigsaw in the end. That was a huge misstep if they were trying to mislead us that way. In the end, all's well that ends well because they did enough compelling things with his character and gave him a good enough backstory to accommodate for the fact that it was very obvious. And I didn't know that his exact identity would be tied in that way. I wasn't piecing together his actual identity, but it was very obvious from the moment that they randomly killed him off screen that he was going to turn out to be the twist villain. But besides that, I'm a huge fan of this film. I really like what they did with this spin-off version of the Saw universe, and I would like to see them do more anecdotal movies like this. I don't think that they need to go back to the John Kramer well every time they make a new Saw movie, although I'm not complaining about seeing Saw X with a whole movie about John Kramer. I'm very happy that we have that, but I'm saying for the future of the franchise, I don't think that they need to shy away from doing movies like this. I like the idea that they can have one-off or future stories with these spin-offs of people, disciples, or just people generally taking the plans and the psychology of Saw and Jigsaw and using them to exact their own kind of revenge or grievance with the system. This is something we saw Jigsaw do in Saw 6, something that we saw here with the police force, and I'd like to see more movies like this. So Spiral from the Book of Saw, are you guys a fan of this movie? I know there's not a whole lot of you out there, but I love this movie. Let me know in the comments section, I'd love to hear. I'm GM Light, have a good one.